Good afternoon. We're going to wait just a moment for everyone to join, and then we will get into some details on matching funds. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is the latest in our webinar series for the BEAD program in California. Today we'll be talking about the matching fund requirements as well as some of the other nuances around those matches. My name is Laura Sasaki. I am one of the program and project supervisors here at the CPUC overseeing the BEAD program. So today we will cover the requirements for the BEAD program and the matching funds. We'll introduce you to how match is defined for the BEAD program based on the NTIA NOFO and the CPUC's initial proposal volume 2 and what's acceptable. We'll then go into what's required in the BEAD application process related to those matching funds. And finally, we'll discuss steps and upcoming outreach and engagement you can participate in, including our office hours later this week. One thing that I want to let you know is that we will be running these series of webinars for hour blocks. We just have that set aside. Some of the webinars will be shorter, some will be longer based on the content. Today's content is specifically tailored to talk about match, so it's one very small but very important component of the requirements of the BEAD program. So today's session will be a little bit shorter. So if we can go on to the next slide, we'll talk about some of the housekeeping items for those of you who are new. So tips for getting the most out of this webinar. Keep an eye on the chat. We will use it as we talk about links or websites or things that you might want to visit. We'll use the chat to communicate that to you. If you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A or email them to beadgrant@cpuc.ca.gov. We will not be able to answer questions during the webinar today, but we will be building our FAQs to post on the website based on the questions that we have and received from you here today. We have English closed captions available. You'll want to select closed captions at the bottom of your screen. You can also click the small arrow on show captions on the toolbar. And then for the best viewing experience, if you want to select side-by-side speaker mode, you'll be able to see the slides as well as the speaker. So I will now turn it over to Ziggy Rifkin-Fish from CTC Technology and Energy, our partner in the planning process, and he's going to present on the matching requirements. Ziggy?
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Let's dive right in. Let's go to the next slide. So as you probably all know, the BEAD program has a match requirement, and it's 25% of total project costs. As you probably know from other webinars, your project area is made up of different units, census block groups, and some of these and altogether, the match should for your entire project should be at least 25% in most cases. So let me get to what that means. Next. So first, let's talk about where your match can come from. It can essentially come from just about anywhere. Most applicants have, of course, come up with the match themselves, but you can also, if you have agreements or other sources or partners that you work with, such as nonprofits or local communities, or you've received funding from other grant funding from other sources that allow this to be used, then those can be leveraged as well. The intent here is, as NTIA has defined it, is to ensure that there is some skin in the game on your side, but also, most importantly, that public funds are used effectively and smartly so that they can be extended to as many locations as possible with the best possible technological solution. There are some federal programs that can be used and sources that can be used for funding, but they're very specific and they're listed here. But just about all other federal are typically not allowed as matches. Next. You can also do in-kind match. So the match requirement for minimum 25% is either in cash or in-kind contributions. And then that can be in the form of property, goods, and services. For example, if you have a backbone that you're dedicating to your BEAD project, and you're putting that into service exclusively for that purpose, then that can be used as well. And we'll get to how do you estimate the value of that a little later. But into the project and various other so labor, of course, can be used as well. Network equipment that you are leveraging exclusively for BEAD purposes, etc. Next. So in terms of in-kind match, as I already mentioned some of those that you can use. Here's a more extensive list. If you have your own pole attachments that you are throwing in there, that the fair market value of that can be used. You may have easements and conduits that you can leverage, and other forms of infrastructure. It is important to know that, and this is the subject of another webinar, but there are Build America, Buy America rules that BEAD has to conform with, and that is true for all equipment that you purchase for this this project that you're proposing, and that then also cover the in-kind match. Next. So here comes to the exception that I alluded to. So NTIA does, of course, recognize that there are some, as did the legislation that NTIA's Notice of Funding Opportunity was based on. They do recognize that there are some areas, census block groups is what NTIA uses as their unit for this purpose, that are so-called high cost. High cost is a composite notion. How it actually gets determined by NTIA depends not just on projected capital expenditures, but also the total cost of service over an extended period of time. So those are, for those areas, it is the match requirement is waived. What that means is that when you have a proposed project consisting of multiple census block groups, your required match percentage will be proportional, prorated based on which census block groups are included and if they qualify as high cost or not. If they are all high cost, then your entire project would obviously not need, the minimal match requirement would be exactly 0. Next. So these areas were determined when this program was kicked off in the Notice of Funding Opportunity was released. Those areas do not change. And the list of those areas are available. NTIA has made that available. It'll also be made available by CPUC during the application phase. But that being said, NTIA did of course recognize that there are locations that may have difficulty attracting a business case, and in order to be included in projects, a waiver may be possible. So you can, if you want to include some areas, but the business case is just not there for a 25% match, you could request a waiver for a lower match. If you and the intent of NTIA for providing this waiver option is to, on the one hand, to keep that 25% skin in the game, responsible use of public funding, while at the same time also making sure that there aren't locations that just can't attract funding at all because of this requirement. So in order to operationalize that while keeping those objectives in mind of effective use of public funds, the NTIA basically said you'll have to provide proper justification. Means that you as the applicant, and by implication CPUC, when it submits the waiver to NTIA, waiver request to NTIA, will have to show that that this was just, that it's just not feasible to fund it without a match waiver. And what that means in practice, and by implication, is that proposals that request to have a waiver will be processed later. The CPUC is required to first score and evaluate proposals that do fulfill the minimal match requirement, and only if it's not possible to assign those, to award those areas because the cost is prohibitive, for example, or no bids were received at all, only then can CPUC then consider those that requested a waiver. Now, the justification will be part of the application process, so there'll be a narrative where you can provide that justification. CPUC will, of course, evaluate it, and then if it determines that sounds reasonable, then it will include, and decides to award the project, it will include that in the final proposal that it'll submit to NTIA for approval. Next. Go on. So you'll be asked to certify, and this is part of your, you'll be asked to certify several things in your applications, but one of those is that you have sufficient financial resources, and that includes the matching funds that you propose to offer. So if you are offering 25, 35, 56% match, you are certifying that you can indeed live up to those commitments. Okay, and that and it'll also, I should also add that certification includes your commitment to cover costs, even if there are cost increases. So your proposal is your proposal. If you are committing 56%, then that's what you're committing. Go on. So you'll be asked a few things that are specific to your project proposal. As you I'm sure you can imagine, you'll be asked, well, what's the total amount of matching funds that you are going to offer? And then it'll ask you to break those matching funds down into cash. That can include eligible federal sources, as mentioned earlier, and also the in-kind matching funds. Now, for the in-kind matching funds, you'll have to provide both what's the source, and there'll be a template that has where you can fill this stuff in, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Um, and there's kind of a spreadsheet with different columns, and you can put those things in. You'll also be asked if you have in-kind matching funds to provide a justification for valuation. A little bit more about that. Then, and then if you are doing a matching fund waiver, then you need to provide how much and the justification for it and any documentation to show why it's just not financially viable without that waiver. Next. So just a few things about how this template works. The budget template has line items in it, and you'll choose particular categories of cost that this goes into. And that ensures also that your cost categories are eligible expenses. So whether they are direct expenses, matching funds, in kind, whatever, they fit into a category that is an eligible cost. Next, I'll explain the method of evaluation in the next slide. So why don't we go on? Actually, the slide after this. So scoring criterion based on match. For those of you who've looked at the scoring, you'll note that the scoring is heavily influenced by the match that you offer. A full 20 points is available. And you'll get the full 20 points if you offer 65% or more. And then there's kind of a sliding scale with declining points depending on how big a match you're willing to offer. Down to 0 points if you offer 25%. Scoring and the matching, and what you'll be based on, the matching percentage will include the total matching percentage. So it doesn't matter whether these are cash or in-kind match, whether they are your own or from third parties. Okay, next one. Okay, so let me go back to what I promised in terms of the valuation. The valuation and justification of in-kind match, as again, you'll get that template where you can fill the stuff in. But let's say you are offering dedicated conduit space. So your valuation might be something where you're already leasing these out in other areas at a particular price, and you can document those. That's a fair market documentation and justification. And if you have published pricing on it, or you have some other sources that you documentation that you can mark as confidential, that would then be accepted as a justification and as a valuation method. So whatever you put in the in-kind, you'll be asked to show what kind of evaluation method you use to establish the price. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. as I promised, it was a pretty short presentation.
Thank you, Ziggy. All right, so moving on to next steps. Our next steps, next week on Tuesday, we'll be talking about other BEAD requirements. This will be a variety, it's kind of a little bit of a catch-all. So we'll be talking about Build America, Buy America, the Historic Preservation Act, low-cost service offerings, and some of the other topics that sort of don't fall into a really clear-cut, concise webinar like Ziggy delivered today. So we'll have all of those registration links up on the BEAD events page, and I'm sure you'll be seeing the link to that very shortly in the chat. You can also find the recordings from these webinars as well as the slide decks on that page as well. And if you have questions that you may have posted today that you just can't wait to get an answer to by the time we post the FAQs up on our website, please think about registering for office hours. We have office hours Thursdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific time. And that runs through May 8th. So as we have more webinars, as we have more information about BEAD available, you'll probably have more questions that you'd like to have answered in real time. So the questions that we can answer, we will. If you give us a really good one, we may need to take that back and discuss a little bit. But please sign up for our office hours. Those are also on the events website. If you'd like to reach out to us via email, we have an email that is set up and dedicated to BEAD, and I believe that's on the next slide. Yes, it is. beadgrant@cpuc.ca.gov. That is specific to the subgrantee selection process, things that you're hearing here in the webinar. If you have general overall questions about the BEAD program, we still also have our BEAD at cpuc.ca.gov. But if you're interested in what's going on with the subgrantee selection process or have questions about that, you can use the BEAD grant email. We are working on updating the website with relevant and recent information. So you'll want to check back there. That is the landing page. You'll have some navigation that'll take you out to some additional resources. We'll be building that out in future weeks and months as we get into the subgrantee selection process more and have more information available. As a reminder, if you haven't already, on that same page, we have the initial proposal volume 2 posted, so you can read that at your leisure. We are honing in on specific pieces and parts of that in these webinars, but if you'd like to sort of get the holistic picture, initial proposal volume 2 is posted on the website. So thank you all for attending today. We hope to see you at office hours or next week at the webinar talking about other BEAD requirements. But we wish you a good afternoon and a good rest of your week. Thank you all.